Welcome, and in today's video, I need to tell you something that can completely change the way you see certain people who cross your path. Because maybe, just maybe, you're trusting someone who only came to hold you back. Maybe you're fighting to keep close someone God already removed from your life in the spiritual realm. And the scariest part, maybe you haven't realized it yet. Have you ever stopped to think that some people enter your life with a beautiful light in their eyes, with sweet words, with manners that seem right, but inside, they carry intentions you can't see? Sometimes the enemy doesn't disguise himself as an enemy. He disguises himself as an opportunity, as affection, as relief, and while you think you're being healed, you're actually being slowly led away from your purpose. There are relationships that look like blessings, but in truth, they're tests. There are people God allows to enter your life just to see if you've learned to discern. And here's the hardest truth. Not everyone who loves you was sent to do you good. Not everyone who listens to you was sent to guide you. Not everyone who walks beside you walks with God. The chosen one must learn this before it's too late, before the heart gets too attached, before the path strays so far from the promise that only regret remains. So tell me, how can you know? How can you be sure if this person is truly part of God's plan, or just a distraction in disguise? Today, I want to show you the truth that God reveals to His chosen ones, before deception turns into captivity. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll start seeing things you couldn't see before, and maybe that will save you from a mistake heaven has already tried to warn you about many times. And before we dive into this revelation, I want to ask you something simple. If this message speaks to you at any moment, write here in the comments, "Lord, prepare me to recognize what comes from you." Alright, it may seem like just a phrase, but for those who write it in faith, it can be the beginning of a turning point. Now let's go together and uncover the truth every chosen one needs to know before it's too late. Now, take a deep breath, because what comes next may be hard to accept, but it will set you free. Section 1. Maybe you've been through this before, meeting someone who seemed to be the answer to an old prayer. Everything appeared to fit perfectly. The conversations flowed, the feelings felt pure, and there was even a sense of peace. But deep down, somewhere in your soul, something felt off. Something didn't make sense, and no matter how hard you tried to ignore it, that soft inner voice wouldn't go silent. That voice was the Spirit trying to warn you. The problem is that the chosen one often learns to trust too much in what they feel and too little in what heaven reveals. The Bible tells us that the human heart is deceitful. In Jeremiah 17:9 it says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can understand it?" That means not everything that feels right comes from God. From an early age, we've been taught to look for signs in our emotions. If it makes me feel good, it's from God. If it brings me peace, it must be right. If they listen to me, it's true love. But the enemy doesn't need to destroy a chosen one with something obviously bad. All he needs to do is distract them with something that seems good, but doesn't come from heaven. That's why the real problem lies deep within, the inability to discern what's divine and what's merely emotional. Many good people have been destroyed by relationships that began with good intentions. And do you know what's most painful? When the chosen one begins to confuse God's voice with their own desires. When they want something so badly that they start praying only to confirm what they feel, instead of asking to hear the truth. That's where the roots of the problem grow. The lack of patience, the rush to fill the emptiness, the loneliness that speaks louder than faith, the fear of being alone, the desperation for companionship. All of this opens dangerous spiritual doors. And the enemy knows exactly where to strike. He studies your heart, he sees what you crave, and then he sends someone who seems perfect, someone who says the right words, acts the way you've always wished someone would, but who, little by little, pulls you away from the presence of God. That person may not be evil, they might even be just as lost as you, but what matters isn't how good they seem, it's how much they draw you closer to or further from your eternal purpose. That's why God, in His mercy, begins to allow signs. He creates small moments of discomfort. He lets conversations become confusing, He reveals hidden flaws, but even then, many chosen ones keep insisting because they've already become emotionally attached to the idea that this is the right person. It's not a lack of prayer, it's a lack of listening. It's not a lack of faith, it's an excess of expectation. And so the problem grows silently, until it becomes an invisible prison, made of chains forged from neediness, blindness, and self-deception. But this spiritual captivity has a way out, and that's what we're going to start revealing next. Section 2. The most frightening part is that when a chosen one gets involved with the wrong person, destruction doesn't usually happen quickly. In fact, it almost never does. The enemy is subtle. He prefers to work slowly. He doesn't pull you away from God's presence all at once. He does it gradually. One small thought here, one wrong choice there, and by the time you notice, you're already far from the place where God had placed you. And it all started with someone who seemed harmless. That's how invisible consequences settle in. They don't scream. They whisper. And they whisper precisely when you are most vulnerable. The chosen one begins to change, without even realizing it. They start to tolerate things they once would never have accepted. They slowly abandon the habits that once fed their faith. Prayer becomes something occasional. Reading the Word loses its power, and that flame that once burned in the heart begins to fade into embers. But the most dangerous part is when all of this happens with the appearance of peace. Because the wrong person can still make you feel comfortable. They can show affection. They can treat you kindly. But if they don't bring you closer to God, they're pulling you away, even if they don't mean to, even if they have no bad intentions. And this distance quietly drains the chosen one's spiritual strength. They begin to doubt their own identity. They start living in confusion, uncertain of what God truly wants. Because when the wrong person occupies the wrong place in your heart, the voice of God becomes muffled. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your life. He only needs to steal your focus. He wants to pull you off the path of the promise. He wants to trap you in a cycle where you're constantly trying to make it work with someone who was never chosen by God to walk beside you. And while that happens, time passes, exhaustion grows, and your mind starts believing that this is the best life has to offer. But it's not. God never intended for you to live tied to a spiritual connection that weakens you. He wants you to walk with someone who strengthens your calling, who pushes you closer to the light, who helps you grow in faith, purpose, and truth. But until that right person comes, or until you learn how to recognize them, the enemy will keep offering you disguised versions of what you desire. And if you lack discernment, you'll fall. Because deception tastes sweet at first, but over time, it turns into a heavy burden. And many only realize it when they're already too wounded to turn back without pain. That's why now is the time to wake up. Heaven is speaking. The Spirit is trying to open your eyes. And if you ignore the signs, you may end up losing precious years of your journey with people who were never part of God's plan. But what if I told you there is a way out? What if there's a way to break this cycle, reclaim what was lost, and finally learn, without confusion, to recognize the difference between a gift from God and a trap in disguise? That's what comes next. There comes a moment when the chosen one must rise, not with anger, not with pride, but with the courage of someone who finally understands that continuing down the same path is costing too much. Because accepting what didn't come from God is giving up what was promised by Him. And this is where rebellion is born. But it's not a rebellion against people. It's a rebellion against deception, against everything that tried to take God's place inside the heart. It's the moment the chosen one says, "Enough. I won't settle anymore for what only looks right. I want what's truly right for me, according to heaven." That kind of decision changes everything. But it isn't easy. Seeing that the person who seemed like the answer was actually a distraction, that hurts. Letting go of someone who makes you feel good but doesn't bring you closer to God feels almost unfair. But that's exactly where true spiritual maturity begins. Because the love that comes from God always begins with sacrifice. And that's the key few people want to hold. It's easier to insist, It's more comfortable to try and fit God's plan around someone who was never meant to be there. But real growth begins when the chosen one understands that the peace of God is worth more than any company. And that's when they turn their eyes upward again. They start praying once more, but this time with a clean heart. They begin asking God, without fear, to reveal who is beside them by mission, and who is there by distraction. And believe me, God always answers that kind of prayer. Then He starts to move everything. People will drift away, masks will fall, and you may even feel alone for a while. But that's not loneliness. That's preparation. It's in that space, between the pain of letting go and the silence of waiting, that heaven works the hardest. That's when God begins to rebuild the heart of the chosen one. He removes the neediness, breaks the illusions, heals the wounds, and teaches the soul to recognize the worth of its true identity. It's there that a new understanding of love, companionship, and purpose is born. And then, slowly, without hurry, God begins to realign the paths. He brings people with the same spiritual hunger. He connects stories that complement each other, and He guides the chosen one with such clarity that they never again confuse desire with destiny. That's what happened to many who now walk in true covenant. People who were once trapped in ties that only brought pain, who cried alone, begging for answers, who felt small for always choosing wrong. But one day, tired of living in deception, they surrendered to God's will. And that day, everything began to change. Because when the chosen one takes a stand, heaven moves. And now, it's your moment. Are you ready to stop insisting on what doesn't align with your calling? Are you willing to let go? To receive what comes straight from the throne of God? If your answer is yes, then prepare yourself, because the deepest revelation is about to arrive, and it could change everything. The truth that God wants to reveal to the chosen one about the right person isn't really about them. It's about you, because before God shows you who the right person is, He needs to show you who you are when you're aligned with Him. Most people believe the promise begins when someone appears, but the promise actually begins when you disappear from ego, from pride, from emotional need, and allow yourself to be completely shaped by the Spirit of God. The right person isn't a reward. They are a part of the purpose. That's why before God unites two paths, He first prepares the soil of each heart, because a divine relationship doesn't grow from two bodies that attract each other, but from two hearts that listen to the same voice. Maybe now it all makes sense. The disappointments, the losses, the waiting, the feeling that no one ever stayed, none of that was punishment. It was protection. It was God preventing you from being tied to someone who couldn't carry the weight of your calling. And this is the revelation the world doesn't teach. The right person isn't the one who makes you forget everything. It's the one who reminds you of who you are in God. The one who strengthens your faith, who prays with you, who lovingly confronts you, who walks in the same direction, even when everything around says to stop. It's someone who doesn't arrive late, because they come at the right time, who doesn't rush, because they wait with patience, and who never forces anything, because they understand that what comes from God comes with peace. Then the chosen one finally understands, more important than finding the right person, is being ready to recognize them. And that readiness isn't found in dates or encounters. It's forged in the secret place, in the quiet chamber of the soul, where the Spirit whispers and teaches, where God works in silence but transforms with precision. It's there that God's voice becomes louder than fear. It's there you discover that true love isn't the one that completes you. It's the one that lifts you higher, that the bond isn't merely emotional but spiritual, that the strongest tie between two people is the one woven by God's hand, invisible yet unbreakable. And when that truth settles in the heart, the chosen one never accepts just anything again, because now they understand that being loved isn't enough. You must also be guided, respected, and recognized as someone who carries a divine calling. In the end, this is what God wanted to show you. The right person doesn't come to save you. They come to walk beside you after you've learned to walk with God. And when that person arrives, you won't have doubts. because there will be peace, there will be truth, and there will be purpose. Now, the choice is yours. Will you keep searching for the right person, or will you allow God to transform you into the right version of yourself? That answer changes everything, and today could be the beginning of a new story. If this message touched your heart, if you felt that God showed you something deep inside, then write in the comments, "Lord, prepare me to recognize what comes from you." That helps me know you're walking with me on this journey, and maybe, just by writing it, someone else will see it and feel strengthened too. And if this video spoke to you in a special way, share it with someone who's waiting for an answer, because what you heard here might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and stay close, because every week there's a new revelation. And I'm sure God will keep showing you what eyes have not yet seen, and what the heart has not yet understood, because what comes from Him never arrives late. It only comes when you're ready.